want to go ahead and talk about the Predator franchise, chat. In case you don't know, Prey will be released later this week, chat. Prey, which is the prequel sequel to the Predator franchise, chat. It's being directed by Dan Trachtenberg, filmmaker who I do like quite a bit. I was a big fan of 10 Cloverfield Lane. He has not done that much since, at least film-wise. He hasn't done that much. I know that he's been doing a lot of stuff on television. I know that he directed a number of episodes on The Boys. Seems to be honing his craft the last few years, but he's just one of those guys I was really excited about because I was a huge fan of the 10 Cloverfield Lane movie. I thought it was a great thriller. I thought, he worked with minimum resources, relying on the performances of his actors, John Goodman, Mary-Elizabeth Winstead, John Gallagher. And I just love the how he used the environment. It was a great bottle film, Chad. It was a story within in a much larger story that was the Cloverfield universe franchise. That kind of went askew. Not his fault, of course. The Cloverfield paradox fucked everything up. But I'm interested to see how that will continue on in the future. But because of the release of Prey, I wanted to talk about the best and worst Predator films in the franchise. And I wanted to rank them. I wanted to discuss them with you guys. Kind of go over why I feel like some of the films in the franchise work and why other films in the franchise do not. And for this particular list, chat, I wanted to include not only the standalone Predator films, chat. So, you have the original 87 Predator, you have Predator 2, you have Predators, plural, and you, of course, have Shane Black's The Predator, putting that the in front of it, giving an emphasis, chat. But also including Alien vs. Predator, AVP, and Alien vs. Predator Requiem, chat. So basically ranking the 6 Predator films that are out there that are available to us, chat. And, of course, we'll start with my number 1 favorite, what I consider to be my favorite, and I think is the best Predator film as of right now, as of this recording, which is the 1987 Predator, chat, directed by John McTiernan, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, Bill Duke, Jesse Ventura, chat. We recently talked about this film, for those of you who are toasties, on Double Toasted, did a very fun retro review talking about why we like this movie so much. And as I said on there, and as Court Coleman and Martin Thomas said on DT, I feel like this film perfectly blends the action sci-fi genre. And as the film goes along, it evolves into a survival story. It subverts the audience expectations of what we often see with a lot of action films in the 80s and a lot of action films during that time, where we introduce these big muscle-bound guys, who are, throwing out all these catchphrases and using these, goddamn guns and basically just jerking each other off, right? But it sets them up to be like the most badass of badasses, and slowly over the course of the next 2/3 of the movie, they're picked off one by one by this extraterrestrial threat, and it stops being a just a straight up 80s action film and becomes a sci-fi survival thriller. And I loved how they subverted the audience expectations. To me, that's the best way to subvert audience expectations. It's like, holy shit, because it doesn't stop being an action movie. It just now you really start to feel for these people because of the situation that they're causing. They're dealing with an enemy that is far more advanced and seemingly more intelligent and deadlier than they are. But at the same time, you still have these characters not have a lot of depth. They don't have a lot of depth. However, there's a lot of charismatic performances in this movie, particularly with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was one of the defining actors of the 1980s and going into the 1990s, yet certainly throughout the 80s and into the early to the mid 90s, of course, stuff like the Terminator 2, which came out in the 90s, but also Carl Weathers and Bill Duke and Jesse Ventura and a number of other character actors who popped up in the film. Yes, they have a lot of bravado. They are, they're ostentatious. Their dialogue is dated, but those big personalities makes them stand out. And where you actually kind of care about them, and you feel concerned for them as we get into the latter half of the movie, where they have to deal with this creature, where they have to put aside their own bullshit because there's a whole other plot line where Carl Weathers betrays a lot of them, and you find out he's manipulated them and he's used them. And they're like, okay, we got to put all that aside and just work on trying to get out of here. And it's I think it's that, but it's also the simplicity of the story. Is like it's very straightforward. It's not overcomplicated. It doesn't bring in all this bits and pieces of lore, and then it helps that it's the first entry in the franchise, and so you can bring what you want to it, and it comes across very simple. You're not trying to just vomit so much lore and exposition at the audience, okay? It's about a bunch of guys trying to survive in the fucking jungle from an alien, right? But it has excellent action sequences. It builds tension perfectly in the second and third acts. And also, Chad, it introduces, I mean, one of the most iconic defining movie monsters of the 1980s, which is the Predator, which, originally was this giant bug. That was the behind the scenes, the production for this movie was kind of a mess. It all worked out in the end, but it was interesting. Like, the original idea for the Predator was this it looked like a giant praying mantis cricket thing. And Jean-Claude Van Damme was going to be in this suit, hopping around the jungle doing kung fu. That didn't work out after 3 days. And they went to Stan Winston and his boys and girls, and they come up with the design for the Predator with the help of James Cameron. Give it mandibles. And an iconic movie monster was doing that. I mean, the Predator, Chad, when you really think about it, it's like the Frankenstein of its day. The Frankenstein monster of its day. It's embedded in the pop culture zeitgeist. And when we see Predator, you instantly think of that reptilian, Rastafarian, crab-faced fucking abomination. That's what you think of. You think of the mask. You think of the shoulder cannon. You think of the knife gauntlet. The plasma cannon and all that. It just sticks out in your mind. So much about this movie works really well. I mean, if I have any criticisms of it, it's like, yeah, there's some stuff that's dated. the use of the F word, and there is just some scenes where you can laugh at. It's like, oh, this is so homoerotic because they're trying to be so macho. But it still stands the test of time as one of the great 80s movies, one of the greatest action sci-fi films, and just one of the greatest, genre movies of American cinema. It's one of those great movies, chat, and one that I frequently watch every year. At least, at the very least once, if not twice a year. Chat. Recently doing it again for Double Toasted, and also doing audio video commentary for it and a review for it on my respective channels. It's a great film. It's a great film, and if you are a sci-fi lover, if you're an action lover, even like horror, there's a little bit of horror blend in this movie too, chat. This is one that you need to see, that you need to put on your docket and watch when you get the chance. But Predator, that's number one, of course. People's number two. I think a lot of people, it's honestly all over the board when it comes to picking number two. But for myself, what I think is the closest to the original Predator, or at least my second favorite, I'd have to say Predators, chat. With an S, plural, chat. What I liked about this movie is that it returns to a seemingly familiar setting, but with a twist, right? Instead of it's very much set in a jungle, and you're introduced to, a bunch of badasses, chat, both male and female this time, from all the different walks of life. It's a very diverse cast, of course, but instead of being on Earth, you find out later in the film, oh shit, we're on a planet somewhere out in the galaxy. And I feel like that's pretty cool. And so initially what looks familiar, you realize oh, but that's a nice little twist, a nice little reveal in the movie itself. It's like, oh no, we're in a fucking foreign world dealing with flora and fauna we've never encountered before. And so that makes it instantly dangerous for our characters and for our leads in the film. It kind of also goes against the grain with its casting. Had a lot of typical badasses you often see in a lot of action films, like Danny Trejo. It's like, oh, of course, he'll be in it. Yes. But it went against the grain and cast someone like Adrian Brody, who is for a long time. I mean, now he's doing Chinese propaganda movies like Dragon Blade, but he was the guy that was featured in Oscar-winning dramas like The Pianist, or these kind of mumblecore dramedies or whatever. But they went with him. And it actually worked. Because when you think of the typical action protagonist, they go oh, it's a really buff, muscle-bound guy. But, for a lot of action films, especially nowadays, in the last, I would say, 20 years, a lot of them are kind of much more thinner. They're toned. Yes, they're muscular, but they're toned. And he had that. He had a good body for it. And I feel like it worked. And I really liked his character. He had that charisma. It was not so over the top. You could tell that this guy has seen some shit, but he had those leadership capabilities. And I really liked him in the movie. He was a captivating protagonist. I bought him going up against a lot of these predators. And that was the other thing that this movie brought. Even though, yes, Predator 2 introduced multiple predators, they didn't really do much of them. But in this one, you have multiple predators in the movie with all their different styles and combat styles, that is, and different types of equipment and things. We also it expands it in a subtle way where it's not all at once. where we do introduce the idea of a predator hierarchy, that there are different seemingly species of predator, the ethnicities of predator, if you will. There's cultural differences between them. You have the typical predator, but you also have this more savage predator. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe different tribes, you can almost say, and they all have their own little customs. Like, that's kind of cool. And they kind of showcase that in the way they look and in the equipment they use and just in their practices. And I thought, oh, this is neat. This is really neat. And also just this new type of creatures. Like, the predators aren't the only threats in those movies. We have these predator-esque dogs that are hunting people. We have some other alien species that the predators have captured and they're using as bait, or they're also hunting. It's like, this is just really interesting what they're doing here. Now, I think the movie does have some issues. There's a lot of unanswered. The movie it ends and you're like, all right, what's going to happen next? We never know. I know that they released a comic, a sequel comic to this movie. I never read it. I think I watched a YouTube video about it. I was like, it was interesting. But still, it just kind of ends like, well, we'll see you next time. We never did, because the movie, sadly, I don't think performed. Not that it was a bomb, but it did not perform very well commercially. I think it broke even. In any case, it wasn't a huge commercial success, right? And we're kind of just left wanting. There are some unnecessary kind of weird twists in the movie and some plot conveniences too, especially in regards to in regards to the twists, like Lawrence Fishburne's character, who originally was actually supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie, but they couldn't get him. And then everything with, oh God, what's his name? Eddie. Oh Lord, what's his name, Chad? I'm thinking Eric Foreman. I can't think of the goddamn guy's name. I don't put him in just because I actually like him. Topher Grace, thank you. Topher Grace, where it's like, oh, I don't know why I'm here. I'm just really good at being a surgeon. I'm like, oh, you're a fucking serial killer. And I thought it was a little, I was like, okay, I know what's going on here. It was like a twist that it's like, yeah, we know you're a bad guy. We know you're a fucking serial killer in any case. But despite that, and not all the badasses, quote unquote, in the movie had a big personality. There were some people like, oh, I forgot this guy was fucking in the movie. They're like their last stands. Like, there were some, I love the Yakuza guy. I'm like, I don't know why you're just saying he did the whole Billy thing. It was basically the Billy scene, except we saw him fight the Predator. It was cool, but he was just there to be a badass, not much of a personality. He was the quiet type. He was the quiet type, and I wear a suit, and I have some of my fingers cut off, whatever. And the Russian guy's like, I'm Russian, obviously, and that was it. But yeah, it did more right than wrong, in my opinion. I feel like it's definitely the second strongest entry in the Predator franchise. It's one that I encourage more people. Mahershala Ali was fucking in this movie. He was in the movie too. I totally fucking forgot about that. Oh my God. He was as Mombasa. Mombasa, he's a death squad soldier from Sierra Leone. I totally fucking forgot. And he's in Mahershala Ali. That guy brings personality. Yeah, it didn't feel like they did enough of some of these guys. Not that they were bad. I just feel like they did enough of them, But in any case, like I said, this movie does more right than wrong. I think it's a really strong entry in the Predator franchise. I do think at this point, I think it's the second best. And if you haven't seen it before, you're like, I don't know about that. It was kind of put off by Predator 2. I recommend this one. This one I feel like is deserving of a second chance. And hopefully more people will be able to check it out, Chad, especially with Prey coming out. Moving on from that, we get to the one where I feel like, I don't hate it, but it's very middle of the road. And that is Predator 2, Chad, which is, the sequel, the proper sequel to the original Predator. It's what I like about this movie, the things that I can be positive about right at the start. Interesting new setting. It's like, hey, we don't want to just go to the jungle again. That would be too easy. Let's just not remake the same film again. Okay, come on. Let's change the overall aesthetic. And now we're moving from the jungle to the urban jungle, Chad, moving to a city. And I thought that was really cool. Also, a bit of a dystopian movie, because even though the movie, I think, came out, 91, 92, I think, or maybe it was 90. I'm trying to remember the specific year it came out. In any case, Chad, it's actually set in a somewhat dystopian, futuristic 1997, and it's subtle. You can if you listen to the news report, very robot. It's funny. The movie is definitely taking notes and aesthetics from Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, or maybe even Total Recall to a degree. And just probably more so RoboCop, where you listen to the news reports and they're just talking about the state of geopolitics and the sociopolitical things that are going on. That the fucking ozone layer's gone, and it was interesting. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I really like the setting of the movie, and like the fashion is like it's slightly modified, where it's like okay, it's definitely of the '90s, but it looks slightly futuristic, and like the guns they use are like slightly more advanced looking than we're used to. It's like okay, there's some cool, interesting ideas put into this film. And the other thing, which it's sad because I feel like the movie got maligned because of this, but they casted Danny Glover as the lead, where they didn't bring back Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think there was an attempt to bring him back, but he passed on it. There was like weirdly multiple attempts to bring back Arnold Schwarzenegger to this franchise, and it's like either he was busy or it didn't work out. He didn't want to be a part of it. It's very fascinating. The only time Arnold came back was for the video game, most recently, recording lines for the Hunting Grounds, the multiplayer one. Asymmetrical multiplayer one. I like Danny Glover a lot in this movie. I feel like he got a lot of flack because, Danny Glover, he's the old guy. He's the old man in Lethal Weapon. But I felt like he held his own very well in Predator 2. Like, and it made sense. I was talking to Martin Thomas the other day, and because he's a big defender of Predator 2. He really likes that movie a lot. And I thought he was right. It's like, well, Danny Glover is supposed to be like a senior detective. And if you're a senior detective, for a police department, you're going to be older. It just makes sense. Like so often when we see like these senior detectives, like in these police shows, police movies, they're all these young fucking 20-year-olds. It wouldn't make any sense for them to be all young fucking 20-year-olds. It makes sense to be a little older. And so I was like, yeah, listen, I bought Danny Glover in a lot of the action scenes that they put him in. And it was realistic because he was fucking exhausted. He was like, fuck, Jesus, it worked. All of his stuff worked. And I don't feel like he should have been criticized as harshly as he was originally for the film. And there's some funny, cheesy action sequences in the movie. I don't feel like they measure up to like the original Predator, but the chase scene on the rooftops, chat, the battle inside the ship, I think is really cool. We see the Predator ship for the first time. We see like the skulls. You see the alien skull. It's like setting up Alien versus Predator. Look where that went. But I really liked all that. But there was some. It was a lot more comedic in tone. And some of the comedy, again, comedy is very subjective. Some of it's going to work for you. Some of it doesn't. A lot of that film's comedy kind of took me out of it. Like, there's this whole bit with the old lady, like, quiet down. And the Predator just fucking bursts out. And like all that. It didn't really work for me. Outside of Danny Glover, I think the cast is just kind of boring. Like, you have some big personalities. Like, you introduced some fun characters like King Willie. King Willie, Chad, of I forget what his fucking group is. Was it the Haitians? I forget what they are. Whatever his gang is. But this guy has this fucking amazing looking outfit. I mean, he has personality and charisma shooting out his ass. And he has a great scene with Danny Glover where he's like, I got nothing to tell you. I'm going to read the fucking bones. He's Jamaican, thank you. The Jamaicans. Listen. Very stereotypical. Very stereotypical. That's fair. It's fair criticism, but he at least was giving me something that these other characters just really weren't. Like, does anyone remember what Danny Glover's partner was named? What was that guy's name? I don't remember. He's a good guy. Like, I like him. He didn't deserve to get got like he did, but whatever. You have Bill Paxton. You have Bill, who was always great. Man, he's been killed by a Terminator, fucking alien, and a Predator. He was just doing this Bill Paxton. He felt like he was like a lesser version of Hudson. You had the female detective who was pregnant. She's like, her defining feature is like, I got a baby in me. That's about it. But yeah, so much. And then, yes, you have Gary Busey being Gary Busey. And that's the thing. Like, you introduce Gary Busey, you introduce King Willie, and they get so little screen time, you just fucking kill them. I would have liked them to be more a part of the movie, and they're just Danny Boy. Yeah, Danny Boy. And they're just not in a lot. And we're stuck with these kind of like lesser characters to me. And so I wasn't, when they died, I was like, oh well. Or they just leave the film and like, all right, see you later. This one's pregnant. Well, we got to get her out of the movie. You can't have no pregnant woman chasing after predators, chat, I guess. Yeah, it was Annabelle and being Alabama. Yep. Yeah, it was just, I don't know. It didn't have that. And, it definitely had a little more cheese, and not all the action I thought was consistently shallow. There's some good stuff, but there's some other stuff that was like, this isn't really working for me. Also, it felt really long. It had a couple of pacing issues too. Clever that the Predators using the games to destroy each other, to filter out the deadliest members, of course. But still, disappointing. And again, it kind of ends where it's like next, and where Danny Glover isn't his literally like last lines. Oh yeah, the piece of candy kid. Want some candy? Piece of candy? You want some candy? Yeah. But then it ends where Danny Glover's saying, next time, motherfucker. Next time. There was no next time unless there was books. I'm sure there was books or comics where they did that, but I didn't read them. I didn't read them, chat. But not a bad movie. Not a bad movie. A mixed bag of a film with some underappreciated elements, in my opinion, especially with the setting, the tone, and the setting and the aesthetics, I should say. And I think Danny Glover's performance. I really liked him in the movie quite a bit. But yeah, definitely mixed bag. Definitely the middle of the road of the films, you know. And now we're moving on to the films where I'm like, all right, these are kind of straight up either so bad they're good or just straight up bad. And maybe the first one I could say is like, okay, this is so bad that it's good, and that is AVP, chat, or Alien versus Predator, directed by Paul W. Anderson, which does not star the wife. I have to admit, chat, I kind of respect Paul W. Anderson for not putting his wife in this movie. I'm sure he wanted to. I'm sure he's like, I'm going to have my wife, she's going to be the new Ripley for a new generation, but he did not. Now, the thing about AVP, you know, it is a big, dumb sci-fi action movie that go boom. It go boom, chat. It go boom real loud. It's an extraterrestrial slugfest between franchises. Like, they literally have WWE, Raw, SmackDown, whatever it is, style fights in the film, chat. Like, you have, and it doesn't matter. There's human characters there. You don't really care. They unearth a pyramid, which finds out predators helped curate, you know, human civilization. They helped them build pyramids, sure. And it's a hunting ground thing, so the predators can, you know, blow off some steam. Whatever. But what you're there for is, and the predators use aliens as prey to also hunt and to prove themselves and test themselves. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because what you're there for is these fucking monsters to fight each other. You literally have a scene, straight up wrestling, where the predator grabs the alien by the tail and spins it around the fucking room like this, hitting it into concrete pillars and throwing it around. That's what's happening in this movie. That's all this is. And when it does that, it's fucking fun. It's a fun time. It's like, this is so dumb, but I'm kind of with it. It's kind of working for me, you know? It's competently directed. It's competently shot. Not saying it's good. Not saying that it's written well, because it's not. It has little emotional weight, and it has very uninteresting characters. Some characters just function to be like, hey, remember me? I'm Wayland, and we got Lance Hendrickson back to play him because he don't care anymore. That's all the movie functions as. It's banking on nostalgia. And banking on audience members' zeal to see these two franchises just punch each other and to throw each other around. And when it does that, it does it well for the most part. You know, it does it well for most. I mean, I think there were some lost opportunities not to have more just alien predator fights. I would have liked to have seen more of that in the movie. You know, there's a lot of human stuff. I'm just like, I just don't fucking care about these people. You know, when they die, it's like, oh, I'm sad when that guy, he had a family. But the thing is, it's that kind of writing where, like, why are you doing this? Why even bother? Where you literally have this, I think it's this Scottish guy where he's, oh, I love my kids. You want to see pictures of my kids? It's like just setting up the fact that this man is going to die horribly. And he does die horribly, chat. He's impregnated and front poops out a baby. Alien baby. Does not work out well for him. And it's just like, oh, you kind of got to sit through all that. And you can laugh at it. You can definitely laugh at how bad it is. Until you get to the next Alien Predator scene, which is actually kind of fun and kind of cool, you know? Oh, and this is another thing. Apparently it was controversial at the time. I didn't mind it because I thought this was kind of fun. I liked the team up between humans and predators. I know people were like, oh, fuck this. I like that. I thought that was neat. Where it's, you know, it's very much a situation where the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which they even fucking say in the movie. Or you have the one lead girl. Is the Ripley Schwarzenegger, whatever you want her to be. And where she teams up with the Predator, and I like that they're like, fuck yeah, let's fucking do this. Did we just become best friends? Hell yeah. I wish they did the Arnold, Carl Weathers just like fist grab, except it was the Predator and her just going, yeah, I like that. Sana Lathan, is that the actress? Now, I'm not familiar with her, but I mean, again, she's not bad. Like, you know, it's like she's doing the best she can with the material that she's given. But it's Blade's mama. She did a decent job. She did a decent job, competent job. She did what she was supposed to do. Much better than The Wife, because that role was probably meant for Mila Jovovich, and Sana Lathan is better actress than Mila Jovovich, I can say. I like that scene when they team up, and I like that they became friends, and that they're predators. It also establishes the predators really are the species, like most of them at least, not all of them. Like that first predator was like, fuck this, honor and code and all that bullshit. Hey, no one's seeing me what I'm doing. But I like that predator really respected her and built her like that alien weapon. She had like that fucking tail spear and that alien shield made of its head. And then you had the old predator come down and go, hey, you're pretty cool. You're pretty cool. We're going to give you some stuff. Here's this spear. It's my spear. We'll see you later. Hope you don't freeze to death. Can I get a lift? Nah. Gotta set up another movie. I like that. I didn't mind it. To me, it's a solid, this is a fun rental. It's a fun, high rental, maybe just, it's a solid fun rental. Solid fun rental, Chad. That's what I would give. Maybe not high. We'll go right there. Good old rental movie, in my opinion. And moving on from that, Chad, then we get to, in my opinion, the truly awful Predator movies. These ones, I'm like, fuck these movies. These are some old bullshit or just fuck you territory. All right, in my opinion. And the first one, chat, that I have up here for that one is The Predator, which is the most recent Predator movie that we've gotten, chat. And you would think, like, oh, you're getting Shane Black back. You're going to do it right. Perfect. He famously was in the first Predator film as Hawkins, but they really brought him on there to do script rewrites, which they used some of that. They threw out the rest. Who even knows what of his script was actually used in the original Predator movie? He brought a lot of pussy jokes to it. Yeah, Shane Black loves to make jokes about women's vaginas and genitalia. I'm like, I don't really know why. I'm like, what is? It's very odd. It's very odd. I'm like, I just don't really get that personally. Humor is subjective, and I'm like, you have an affinity for that. In any case, you're bringing him back. Perfect. Yeah, and then I was like all of us. Like I was tricked. I was like, oh, this is great. I thought, this is a good idea. Bring him back. He's been the part of the original one. It can't be bad. We were all thinking that. And then we all saw the movie. And wow. All the standalone Predator movies, Chad, this is the worst one. This is the absolute worst one because it makes the mistakes that so often happen with franchise films that just jump the shark or just run out of ideas, where they start adding dumb stuff for the sake of just trying to keep the franchise alive, trying to keep it on life support. And instead of keeping it simple and straightforward like the original movie, even Predator 2, this one makes the mistake of trying to expand the lore, and it does so horribly. One, it just attempts to recapture the same tone of the original, but just fails. With having hey, we're going to have a big cast of characters who are very charismatic. The thing is, though, Chad, this is the problem with those cast characters, which is a great cast. Boyd Holbrook as I live and breathe, the Wolverine, who I love Boyd Holbrook. I always want to see Boyd Holbrook in things. But Boyd Holbrook, you bring in Keegan-Michael Key, you bring in Thomas Jane, you bring in all these very charismatic actors, they all have great comedic sensibilities as well, and they all talk like Shane Black. And so they're all fucking making pussy jokes. And it's like, what the hell is it? You're like, oh my God. And you realize that's what this movie is. It's just a whole bunch of Shane Blacks thinking that they're all funny. You get a Hispanic Shane Black, you get a white Shane Black, you get a lot of white Shane Blacks, you get a black Shane Black, you got maybe a mixed race Shane Black, you get a Scottish Shane Black. It's like they're all the fucking same person. And you're like, this is aggravating. This is horrible. Sterling K. Brown's chewing gum. He's chewing gum and shoots his own head off. It's like, what the hell's going on? Despite being filled with Shane Blacks and Olivia Munn, listen, a lot of people hate Olivia Munn. They think she's a bad actress. I just feel like she's good in the movie. I think she's good. She's probably the best actor in the film aside from Boyd Holbrook in the film. It's just, she's just not given a good role. She's just not given good material. I want to see her in better things. But in any case, she almost acts like a critique to the pussy joke. She's like, what, are you talking about my pussy? And he's like, no. It's like, yes, you were. We all heard it. Anyway, the film has terrible editing. I mean, the post-production for this movie was notoriously bad. They were changing stuff. There was rewrites. The dialogue and chat, the lore changes. The lore changes. Like how I said at the top, you're overcomplicating the story by adding new things to it. In this case, it's extremely dumb things when you really think about it in retrospect. for the life of me, like, it's simple. Why do the predators hunt? Because it's a part of their culture. They want to hunt the most deadliest species in the galaxy. And on Earth, the most deadly species is man, is human beings, right? But Shane Black said, no, that's dumb. It's not about, no, they don't want to hunt because it's part of their culture, or because they want to prove themselves to be the most deadliest race alien species in the galaxy. And fighting against us. No, they want to take all the autism. They want to get all the autism and put all the autism inside them to become super autistic. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's the plot of this movie, chap. The predators don't collect skulls and spinal cords and bones to display and everything and prove that they're the best. No, they've been, according to Shane Black, they've been doing it because the predators desire to be autistic. And it's so, it's just, and this was a trend. I think it might have stopped now, but we'll see if it crops back up again. But it was a trend in the 20-teens for to portray autistic people, or just use autism as like it's a superpower. It was in that Ben Affleck movie. I forget what it was. It was God, what was it called? Not the autism, but it was the Actuary. It was one of those. You had a whole show about like a medical surgeon genius, but he was autistic. It's like, The Accountant. Thank you. And then you had this movie too, where the predators are trying to hunt for Boyd Holbrook's son because he is the most autistic person on the planet, and they need all of his autism so they can inject it into them so they can make super predators. They also do super, which in the concept is like, super predators are cool. But then you have this other subplot where the little predator is going to Earth so it can warn humanity about the super predator. And this is all the rewrite stuff, because the predator was supposed to team up with the humans. But then the predators ends up killing a bunch of them. It's like, well, you're trying to warn humanity, but you're killing. What are you doing? It doesn't make any fucking sense. It is just, it's all over the place. And you're just frustrated. And again, it ends in kind of the same way as Predator 2 and Predators does, where it's like, next time, where the predators apparently have an Iron Man suit that Boyd Holbrook's like, I'm gonna use that in the next movie. He's like, no, you ain't. As I live and breathe, no, you ain't, Boyd Holbrook, because the movie was a huge commercial failure and a critical failure, and put the Predator film franchise on ice for quite some time, until most recently, Chad, where Disney acquired the property, and they got Dan Trachtenberg to do Prey, which I'll be seeing very soon. I'm curious where it's going to rank here. But, Chad, despite all that, I don't think that's the worst movie. I don't think that's the worst movie. This is the worst standalone film. This is honestly, like, just because of how exploitive it was and how tone deaf it was and how it's just a complete failure of the franchise and makes things in retrospect look dumb. You make other films in the franchise look bad because of this movie. It's a fuck you. It's probably a fuck you movie, honestly. But to me, Chet, what still holds the torch of being the biggest piece of shit in either franchise, in either Alien or Predator, and that's Alien versus Predator Requiem, AVP Requiem. Fuck this movie. This is an awful film with terrible characters, edgelord sensibilities. It's mean-spirited. Listen, these movies are violent, but there's something about its violence that kind of disgusts me. I'm not a prude, but just how it gleefully showcases violence, particularly against pregnant women. I don't know. There's an infamous scene in this movie where you have this abomination, the Pred Alien, which is from the video games and the comics and things. But the way in which it kills pregnant women in this movie, I'm like, this makes me very uncomfortable. There's just something about it that just really bothers me to this day. And I just, when I saw that, I was just really disgusted by that. And to me, that's offensively bad. And these guys, and it doesn't help that, like, you don't care about anyone. You don't care about any of these. You don't care if they die. And it's all it is. It really does feel like, what if we made an Alien vs. Predator movie or Alien movie or Predator movie, but we shot it like a Friday the 13th sequel? That's what this feels like to me. It's like it's a Alien or Predator movie with the sensibilities of a Friday the 13th slasher film. Where you go to a small town, people are disappearing, we don't understand why, and then And you have human characters that stumble into scenes and die horribly, and you don't give a shit because they're all awful people. They're all selfish. They're narcissistic. They say dumb things. They can't deliver dialogue, and they're just meat for the grinder. They are pigs and cows for the slaughter, Chad. That's all they are, and you don't care. And I mean, it makes AVP look like a fucking masterpiece. You know, I think maybe this movie actually helped me, like, kind of reevaluate it, because like, oh, AVP, the original one's bad. It sucks. And I'm like, you know what? There's some things you can really appreciate about that other movie. So I'll give it that. It made me like the first AVP film, but this movie, yeah, it's this. If I had to create like a worst of all time, like a top, I don't know if I put this maybe be my worst, my top 10 worst films of all time. But if I do a top 20, this is in there. Fuck this movie. And the people that made it. I hate it, chat. But that's my ranking of the Predator film franchise. As of right now, Chad, I will be reviewing Prey very soon. I'll be doing both a non-spoiler and spoiler review. I'm excited for it, chat. And despite the lesser entries in the Predator franchise, I'm very curious to see what Disney will do with it. You know, again, you can never tell by first reactions. They seemingly are always overwhelmingly positive. But the one thing that gives me hope is obviously Dan Trachtenberg. I like that it's a period piece, but what I've heard consistently among everyone who has seen the film, it goes back to basics. It's simple, and it's a survival story. I'm thinking, that's what you got to do, which instantly makes you care about the protagonist because they are caught in a situation that's completely out of their hands, and they have to do their best to survive. We already feel endeared to them. Again, we'll see. We shall see. But that is my ranking of the Predator franchise. What about you guys? How do you personally rank these movies? I'm actually very, very curious, chat.